And in Live on Live this week, I'm delighted to announce that we have our monthly meeting with the Africa Report magazine. And joining me today is TAR reporter extraordinaire, and that is Marshall Van Valen. Welcome back to the studio today.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I mean, we had a load of articles that came through from the latest edition of the Africa Report, which is indeed a bumper edition. I've just got my copy of it in the back end of the studio there. But there were 4 articles that I was looking through today, but 2 of them really grabbed my attention. If we have time to get to the other 2, we will. But number 1, the youth wave, and with a fantastic photo of Bobi Wine and the crowds behind him. I mean, literally, you can see that this guy really is the star that he set out to be from the outset as a musician, but now as a member of parliament. But this is all about the wave that is now coming across Africa, where the youth are really using their people power. The demographics are very interesting. And of course, it's all got to do with the dangerous combination, if I quote, is a lack of job opportunities, poor economic growth, a growing youth demographic, and an authoritarian government. So of the 200 million of the continent's 1.2 billion aged between 15 and 24 now, that figure is set to rise to 321 by 2030. So yet again, this is a popular wave that's going around the country, around the continent of Africa. We start off with Uganda, but give us a look at exactly what happens within this demographic. They still don't vote, do they? They don't get out to vote.
No, well, that's one of the problems that these long-serving presidents are finding, that kind of the old ways of getting young people involved in politics aren't working. Social media is really prevalent. It's much more easy to mobilize people to get out into the streets. But people are finding that by voting, their vote doesn't change very much. And so it's leading to a toxic cocktail where kind of people are very interested in what's going on and don't have channels to kind of improve their local livelihoods or change things at the national level, especially taking a case like Uganda.
And indeed, I mean, protests are much more accessible. But the other thing is, the flip side of the coin is, if people such as Bobi Wine himself, who is an MP and who is gathering massive support, if they're to make that real step to become a presidential frontrunner and all that, they still haven't got the support or grit of the real people that you need within the institutions. Isn't that right?
Also, because social media isn't a substitute for kind of grassroots mobilization, and kind of you're able to reach out to people, but the connections aren't always as strong as kind of face-to-face, knocking on doors and
holding elbows and kissing babies
and all of that. And so it poses a lot of challenges as to how to, that's one of the criticisms of Bobi Wine, is that, coming up with other policies and kind of forming a national force that regroups all of these people is a much bigger challenge.
Well, indeed, the other thing though as well is he's trying to shake the system, but you have to be part of the system to shake the system. But there's a very interesting quote in here where it says many parliamentarians focused on enriching themselves, some going as far as to tell Bobi Wine just to go slow and enjoy your paycheck. It's the atrophied institutions of African politics that have to be shaken as well. But how can you do that from the outside?
No, exactly. And so that's where the challenge comes in. And Bobi Wine, as someone who represents this youth mobilization and has also become a parliamentarian, has been targeted by the security services and Museveni's government for torture and all sorts of, there are many, many levers that the government has in order to prevent these people from taking a stronger grip on the national debate. And
indeed, as this article, the wide-angle article on the youth wave continues, of course, you can't mention youth wave or populist wave coming from a grassroots or of a protest level without mentioning Julius Malema and the EFF. And within this article, it segues very nicely into the EFF looking to their comrades in Uganda with Bobi Wine and saying, well, we are brothers. We are fighting the same fight. But would this mean that could we even see a Pan-African movement of such a sort if all of the social media and networks all came together, or is it still localized with local issues?
Kind of the jumping off point for this article itself was that Bobi Wine was in Ghana, and our Ghana correspondent was telling us, he's meeting with loads of young people. But it's much more difficult. And what the piece tries to tease out is that looking at the politics of Uganda versus the politics of South Africa, that Julius Malema isn't trying to overthrow a political system. He's trying to, from the grassroots, to win local elections and to get seats in parliament and to become a voice within the system.
And the democratic institutions in South Africa are much more developed than what you would have in other countries, but specifically one could say Uganda as well, because of post-apartheid. But it also touches on Nigeria, and this is the not too young to run movement. So just explain a little bit about what was happening in Nigeria there for not too young to run.
Well, so when you look at things with kind of the Obasanjo government and Buhari and Atiku, you have men who are 70 years old running a country of young people. And, young people are looking at the way that institutions work and how the laws prohibit younger people even from running, and kind of seeing a groundswell of people saying, okay, the system's not going to change in a day. These are the two people we have to choose from, but we want to change the system so that in the long run, younger people are able to get a foothold.
And indeed, they were just reducing, it was like, for a presidential run from 40 to 30, for a governor or senator to bring it from 35 down to 30, and then to be a state assembly member or representative from 30 to 25. So it kind of makes sense. It wasn't being totally exaggerated.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's not a revolution.
It's not a revolution.
Asking for reasonable changes to the system.
Indeed. And also, just the article wraps up very nicely, just where in countries where states are unable to exercise their authority over their own territory and governments are dysfunctional, these are the most dangerous. If the youth bulge, these are the ones most volatile. And the two countries that were really singled out were Somalia and Mali. That, of course, is because of the territorial integrity of Mali is being compromised by Boko Haram and other agents. And Somalia has been in an ongoing, clan war and...
so you see much more, rather than protest or kind of people voting and using the political system, you see a lot of radicalization and people getting involved in jihadi movements or criminal networks. And it takes generations in order to deal with the impact of that.
And very briefly, Marshall, because there was the second article that obviously grabbed my attention because I lived there for quite a while, was the debate on John Magufuli, the president of Tanzania. And it's really, the question it asks is Magufuli's economic nationalism working? So is it?
It depends on who you ask and
which side of the debate you're on
and where you're looking. There are some areas that are much more promising and also kind of very good for grabbing headlines of taking on huge multinational companies and saying, we're going to negotiate a fair deal because the international system, lets gold miners, trounce on our sovereignty without having to pay proper taxes and all of that. But in other areas like the cashew market, where you see the government sending the army in to buy the national crop, it's much more unclear as to the long-term impact of kind of these headline-grabbing moves as to whether it's going to shift the way the economy works and get a fair deal for Tanzanians and boost the local population.
Exactly, and not just keep it within the elite few at the top. And I mean, that's really the problem with the neoliberal kind of market economy that was developed over the last few decades.
Exactly. And so you're looking to see, for example, there's been, big reforms in the tax authorities, but you have to then look at how the government is using that money. For example, it's going to follow in Kenya's footsteps and build a huge railway. But the Kenyans found that wasn't a very good investment. And so in the end, if all of this extra revenue leads to projects that don't develop the country, it leaves a lot of people debating where things are going.
And the people are where it's really at. Okay, Marshall Van Valen, thank you very much for joining me on the program.